folks down here.
I admire your ability to handle the steps with those spikes.
Yes. To have the speaking order, it's here all over the place. Thanks.
I didn't get message. I thought it was green.
Okay. We're here? Oh, no, here comes Chuck.
I'm the only other guy that notices that. Yeah, give him an order.
There's Harry. Hey, Harry. Morning. Okay.
How are you?
Good, man. Okay, in the interest of the heat, we're going to be brief and crisp. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Democrats from the Senate and the House are gathered on the steps of the Capitol with a simple message to our Republican colleagues. Do your job. The Republican Congress is about to leave for an almost 2-week recess. Republicans are leaving Washington without having completed any of the urgent business before Congress. On issue after issue, the American people are telling Republicans, do your job. But the Republicans refuse. Republicans recklessly block action on public health crises facing our nation. They have recklessly chosen to obstruct the robust action needed to protect families from Zika, the new resources needed to confront the opioid addiction, the help needed for the lead-poisoned children of Flint. Also, the fair hearing and prompt vote owed President Obama's Supreme Court nominee. The Republicans block action to create good-paying jobs, to grow the Americans' paychecks, and to build an economy that works for everyone. The American people are fed up with Republican relentless and reckless obstruction. We have work to do. Cancel the recess. Stay here. Do your job. And now I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished Democratic Leader of the United States Senate, Harry Reid.
More than 100 days ago, Justice Scalia passed away. The president did what he should do. He took his time. He was thoughtful. He wanted to make sure that he got a consensus candidate to replace Justice Scalia, and he worked hard to get that done, and he did it. For example, Orrin Hatch said a consensus nominee would be Merrick Garland. But that was then, and this is now. And we've now been waiting almost 80 days since President Obama did his job to have the Republicans do their job. They have been obstinate. Not only have they refused to have a hearing on the Supreme Court justice, which is untoward, never happened in the history of the country, but they've left scores of trial court judge vacancies, in spite of the fact that a third of them are judicial emergencies. As Leader Pelosi just said, you know, mosquitoes are ravaging for the first time in the history of mosquitoes, and they've been scourges for generations and generations. But they never, ever cause birth defects. They do now. CNBC reported this morning, quote, mosquitoes won't wait for D.C. to act on Zika virus. And that's the truth. We're having the lightest schedule in the history of the United States Senate since 1956. In spite of the fact of the population boom that we've had all over America, we're working less, not more, even though the problems have really increased significantly. The Senate, I repeat, will work the fewest days since 1956. It's May, and the Senate is yet to vote on a Friday. And Mondays are well, I don't want to say a joke, but we don't do anything on Friday till at least 5:30. It would be too hard. So really the schedule is turned into a 2.5-day schedule. We come Tuesday, we work Wednesday, and man, it's approaching noon now, and we're damn near out of here. That's the way it is. Lightest workload since 1956. This doesn't take care of the people who are afraid of Zika as they should be. It doesn't take care of the 4 months we've waited to do something about Flint, Michigan. The babies there are still trying to get their lives in order. Their parents are trying to help, but it's hard because lead poisons little brains. Opioid, nothing being done on that. I'm glad that this has been arranged, so we're going to talk about these issues. By refusing to do their jobs, Republicans are turning their backs on the people who elected them. It's time they started doing their work and working a few extra hours each week and not take a 7-week vacation this summer and certainly not take a couple weeks off now.
Thank you, Harry Reid.
We have Congressman Butterfield, who put me in my place yesterday. I went to visit with a few of his friends, and he interrupted my filibuster and said, "We got to go vote." So, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to slide back here, somebody real tall to get out of the sun.
Thank you, Senator Reid. I bring these remarks this morning on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, but also on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, and in fact on behalf of a majority of the American people. The Republicans in the United States Senate are abrogating their constitutional duty in refusing to consider the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland to the United States Supreme Court. Isn't it ironic that the Supreme Court is in our view and the United States Senate is in our view? They are abrogating their responsibility. It's been 71 days. This is a serious constitutional crisis caused directly by Republican obstruction, and it must end. Senator McConnell needs to do his job. The Constitution does not grant the majority leader the power to ignore a nomination to the highest court in the land. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution says emphatically that the president shall seek the advice and consent of the Senate before his nominations to the bench assume their posts. The Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, does not grant the Senate an option to delay consideration of a nomination. There are conflicting opinions from various circuits all across the country. The Supreme Court must resolve these conflicts and settle the law. There are other important cases either pending in the court or soon to reach the court. We must have a full court of 9 justices prepared to review these cases. A 4-4 opinion in a case would lead to confusion and uncertainty and the erosion of public confidence in our judiciary. Senator McConnell, I hope you're listening. Do your job. Stop playing politics with the composition of the U.S. Supreme Court. We need a hearing for Judge Garland and for the other judicial nominees that are languishing in file cabinets in the Senate. This is a shame. Do your job. Thank you.
I'm Bill Nelson. I'm from Florida. Do you all know how much the average cost of taking care of a microcephaly baby over the expected lifetime of that child, usually about 10 years is? It's $10 million. Do you know the personal tragedy of the families of the microcephaly babies? Do you know that there are 1,300 people infected in 48 states today with the Zika virus? Do you know that 138 of those are in Florida, which includes 36 pregnant women? Do you know that Puerto Rico is expected by the end of the summer to have 800,000 people on the island infected with Zika virus which you can imagine we've already had a baby that was a miscarriage with microcephaly. Now, why in the world, in Ebola a few years ago, when we just had a couple of cases in the U.S., and it was an emergency that we rushed to with billions and billions of dollars, why would we not be rushing to approve the president's request? And isn't it interesting that my colleague, the Republican senator from Florida, has co-sponsored the $1.9 billion with me, and yet we can't get any of our other Republican colleagues in the Senate to meet this emergency. There are three words: do your job.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I'm Congresswoman Annie Custer from New Hampshire, and I'm here on behalf of mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers across this country. My people are dying. And I'm here to talk to you about opiates and heroin misuse and substance use disorder. In my small state of New Hampshire, 430 people died last year. That rate is continuing to rise because my colleagues, despite our best bipartisan efforts, the Republican leadership will not let us vote on the resources we need to address this crisis. We have had families come to Washington, 150 families whose children died, to make their case. 2 weeks ago, led by our bipartisan task force to combat the heroin epidemic, we passed 18 bills in the House. The Senate passed the CARA Act virtually unanimously. But the problem is, while we are passing important legislation, Republican leadership refuses to let us vote. This is bipartisan. My colleagues in my delegation support this, and we have states all across the country. We need resources for law enforcement to interdict these drugs before they reach our neighborhoods, to strengthen prevention and education and mental health, to provide the right treatment options to save lives and to treat users with evidence-based therapy, and to help promote lifelong recovery for those suffering from substance use disorder. My Republican colleagues who serve with us on the task force, we now have 85 members, half Republicans, half Democrats. They know that we need resources to fight this devastating epidemic. But our leadership refuses to let us take the vote on the bill I introduced, the Drug Abuse Crisis Act, to provide $600 million in emergency federal funding. I implored the Republican leadership, do your job. Save American lives. Cancel this recess and give us a vote to provide the funding we need to end this epidemic today. And I now call on my colleague from Flint.
Thank you, Annie. I'm Dan Kildee. I represent Flint, Michigan, a city of 100,000 people that for the last 2 years has not been able to drink their water. It has been poisoned by lead through no fault of their own. 9,000 children under the age of 6 have had lead going into their bodies. Lead is a neurotoxin. But 2 years later, Congress has not yet acted to help the people of my hometown. Even though the federal government did not create this crisis, the people who live in my hometown, the people of Flint, they are citizens of Flint, they are citizens of Michigan, they are citizens of the United States of America. One of the first votes I cast after I was elected in 2012 was to provide relief to the people of the East Coast who were suffering as a result of Hurricane Sandy. I was proud to cast that vote because I was proud, as my colleagues were, to stand with our fellow Americans to help people who are in their moment of greatest need. Congress needs to do its job and help the people of my hometown. They have waited far too long, and we know what we need to do. We need to provide the basic help to fix the infrastructure and provide the support, especially to those kids who now face an additional hurdle because of the actions, the callous actions of those in state government. We could do it today. Congress needs to do what it must do to stand with the people of Flint, Michigan, and help them through this crisis. Congress needs to do their job. And with that, I gladly turn it back to our leader, Ms. Pelosi.
All right, thank you very much, Dan Kildee. I thank Senator Reid, Senator Nelson, Chairman Butterfield, Congresswoman Custer, and Congressman Kildee for their very strong words to say to the Congress, to the Republicans in Congress, don't shortchange the American people. Don't shortchange us on the Zika virus. Don't shortchange us on the opiate epidemic. Don't shortchange the children of Flint who challenge the conscience of our country. And don't shortchange justice in our country by not appointing a justice of the Supreme Court. It's time for us not to shortchange the American people on what we do for a living. And we're calling upon the Republicans to do